The LA Kings did not make a major move at the NHL trade deadline as far as bringing anybody in. They did make a minor move, including shipping out Corey Perry. Why did they do that? We'll get into that and more on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the number one sports podcast network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, also one of the co-hosts of Locked On NHL Game Night, a nightly podcast and YouTube show that recaps the night in the NHL. And I'm a passionate LA Kings fan, have been for over 30 years. Well, the NHL trade deadline has come and gone for another season. So what did the Kings do? Well, their biggest move was a subtraction. Veteran forward Corey Perry was traded to the Tampa Bay Lightning for a second-round pick in 2028. The Kings also added two players. They brought in center Scott Laughton from the Toronto Maple Leafs in exchange for a conditional third-round pick. That pick will turn into a second-round pick if the Kings make the playoffs this season. And the Kings also signed, not traded for, but signed veteran forward Mathieu after his season was ended by the St. Louis Blues, who cut him loose. So let's start, obviously, with Corey Perry. On the one hand, getting a second-round pick for a 40-year-old player is pretty nice return. But if the Kings are serious about making the playoffs and doing something once they get there, why would you trade a veteran proven playoff performer? I didn't intend for that to be so many P's, but that's a big reason why the Kings got Corey Perry in the first place. And it's exactly why the Tampa Bay Lightning, a serious Stanley Cup contender, called and asked about getting Corey Perry. So I don't see any other way to interpret this move than the Kings clearly are not very confident about making the playoffs or doing anything once they get there. If they were, they would have held on to Corey Perry. Now, that's fine, but it's also a little frustrating that it kind of took this long for them to figure this out. And I had wondered when the deal went down, because it was a little bit earlier in the trade deadline, or at least it wasn't towards the very end when there was a lot of activity at the very end. I wondered if the Kings were going to use all those second-round picks that they had gotten, second-rounder for Philip Deneau, second-rounder for Warren Fogle, second-rounder for Corey Perry. Would they be able to package all those things, those picks together to end up and go out and get a higher profile player that they were going to add? And the answer to that was no. Now, if you're a Kings fan and you're still holding out hope that the Kings can make the playoffs and maybe do something once they get there, there's no way that you can be happy about the Corey Perry trade. Now, if you're a Kings fan that feels like this season is pretty much over and the Kings need to be acquiring assets for the future, then I would think you'd be pretty happy with that Corey Perry trade. Now, Ken Holland, the Kings GM, said that the injury to Kevin Fiala and to Andrei Kuzmenko and to Joel Armia basically changed the direction that the Kings were looking to go into this season as far as adding other assets for a playoff push. But he also said the Kings are still pushing for the playoffs. And I get it to a point. He's not going to come out and say, yeah, we're not really trying to get into the playoffs. Of course, they're going to try to get in the playoffs, and I get it. But I think actions speak louder than words. And like I said, trading away Corey Perry tells you all you need to know about what the Kings really think about this season. Also, I think you have to also consider Kevin Fiala is not coming back for the playoffs. That was announced by Ken Holland as well. So maybe people like me that were holding on to hope that, hey, we get into the playoffs and then Fiala and Kuzmenko are back. Maybe that could, give us hope for doing something. Well, that's apparently gone now too. But the Kings are not giving up on making the playoffs. You need to know that. So there was a report that Corey Perry wanted to stay in LA, and there was even a report that the Kings were talking about an extension with him. That apparently was not true. Ken Holland said at his press conference that he had not talked to Corey Perry about any kind of an extension. that the Tampa Bay Lightning had called about the availability of getting Corey Perry in a trade. Ken Holland went to Perry and asked him about it because Perry has a no trade clause. He would obviously have to approve any deal. And Perry apparently told him that he would like to go to Tampa Bay, a place where he's been recently in his many travels and certainly has a much better shot at getting to a Stanley Cup final in Tampa than he does in LA. Now, Perry is an unrestricted free agent after this season. Will the Kings try and bring him back? Don't know about that. If this was the last we saw of Corey Perry in an LA Kings uniform, it was certainly an interesting stint for him. Got off to a great start. Had a lot of people like me who hated him for many years suddenly supporting him and being happy he was actually on the team. But it was certainly a weird feeling when the Kings got him, and I was not anticipating him leaving the Kings like this. So if this is the end of the chapter of Corey Perry as a King, it was, again, an interesting time. As for Scott Laughton, he is a depth centerman, likely a third-line center for the Kings. He was, I should say, Scott Laughton was a pretty notable trade deadline pickup a year ago by the Toronto Maple Leafs. They gave him a first-round pick to get him as a depth centerman from Philadelphia, and things just didn't really work out for Scott Laughton with Toronto. As far as this season, 10 goals, 16 points in 63 games. I did want to shout out Esper, who is at autumn_voyage underscore on X. Anyway, this person reposted something from former NHL Stanley Cup winning defenseman turned commentator Erik Johnson, who had said on social media yesterday before Laughton was traded to LA, quote, "Can't believe Scott Laughton is still out there. Contenders should be all over him. Low AAV, does everything well, and is the ultimate team player. Adds so much for a team on and off the ice. Glue guy. Every teammate loves him. One of my favorites. Feel like he would be a great fit in Detroit." End quote. That was Erik Johnson, former Stanley Cup winner with the Avalanche, now a hockey commentator, talking about Scott Laughton. Well, didn't go to Detroit, does come to LA, and let's certainly hope that he is every bit of all the things that Erik Johnson claims that he is. Certainly a nice endorsement for sure. Johnson talked about the average annual value for Scott Laughton, and he's right. He's only making $1.5 million. He is an unrestricted free agent after this season, so the Kings will have to resign him if they want him after this year. His numbers I talked about in Toronto were not that impressive, but he is a guy who can play on the penalty kill, and his faceoff percentage is good, 56.7%. That would currently put him as the best player on the Kings in terms of faceoff percentage, slightly ahead of Andrei Kopitar, who's at 56.3%. The Kings also pick up Mathieu Joseph, who recently had his contract terminated by the St. Louis Blues. He gets a prorated deal for the rest of the season at $900,000. He's a former Cup winner with Tampa Bay. He did play for DJ Smith in Ottawa, so there's some familiarity there between the Kings' new head coach. He's a depth winger. I don't know exactly where they're going to play him. I certainly wouldn't play him over Kenny Connors or Shane Wright. I guess early word is he might be playing with those two guys. Certainly would not have him in the lineup over Taylor Ward or Jeff Malott, who've done so well as wingers on the fourth line. So I'm not sure where he fits, but I guess we're going to find out on Saturday and beyond where exactly he's going to play. And that was it for the LA Kings at the trade deadline. So when the dust has settled here recently for the Kings, when you factor in the Warren Foegele trade, 2 players out, Foegele and Perry, 2 players in, Laughton and Joseph, and of course, I'd throw certainly Artemi Panarin in there as well. The Kings also get a pair of second-round picks while sending out a conditional third-round pick. All in all, I guess when you factor in the Panarin deal, it's not a bad trade deadline. It's certainly not as overwhelming as I anticipated it would be. But the Kings came to the conclusion, and I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm just saying it is a little frustrating how it all worked out, that clearly the Kings are not, in their mind, a team that's going to likely make the playoffs and a team that's likely going to do anything once they get there. And I don't think that's an unreasonable opinion to take. It is unusual, to see what they've done while also hearing them say we're still trying to make the playoffs, which I get, but you know what I'm saying. So obviously the Kings are not going to be able, or weren't able to address, getting a replacement for Andrei Kopitar at this deadline. Maybe they do something at the NHL draft. Maybe they do something in the offseason in free agency. They're going to have to, because with Kopitar leaving, there's a void there at center, and Scott Laughton certainly doesn't fill that void. So I would say, the trade deadline for the Kings was probably a bit disappointing. But on the other hand, I mean, I think you also have to, when you really think about it, feel pretty good that Ken Holland didn't trade away, any future first round picks or any of the few prospects we have left in some, kind of vain attempt to get some pieces to try and get this team a little bit farther in the playoffs. So, in the end, even though Ken Holland was hired to get the Kings over the hump, I think that even he and the rest of the people in the organization had to take a hard look at where the Kings really are and decide, you know what, it's just not going to happen this year. And we've got to kind of cut our losses a little bit. Yeah, we're still going to try and make the playoffs. But in the end, we're not going to do anything that's going to hurt this organization in the near future as far as assets and, picks and prospects and things like that. So what ended up happening to all those players we talked about the Kings possibly looking to get? And did any of the teams that the Kings are competing with for a playoff spot make any major additions? We'll get into that next year on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Cold days, packed schedules, and big goals, that's winter. And when there's not a lot of time to cook, eating well can feel like another thing on your to-do list. That's where Factor comes in. Factor makes healthy eating easy with fully prepared meals designed by dietitians and crafted by chefs, so you can eat well without the planning, prepping, or cooking. Factor meals are always fresh, never frozen, and ready in about 2 minutes. The ingredients stand out: lean proteins, colorful veggies, whole foods, and healthy fats, no refined sugars, no artificial sweeteners, and no refined seed oils. There are tons of varieties with 100 rotating meals each week, so it never gets boring. Options like high protein, calorie smart, Mediterranean diet, GLP-1 support, and even new Muscle Pro collections for strength and recovery. Perfect for busy weeks when you just want meals that support your goals without the stress. So head to factormeals.com/LockedOnNHL50 off and use the code LockedOnNHL50 off. You'll get 50% off and free breakfast for a year. Eat like a pro this month with Factor. New subscribers only, various by plans, one free breakfast per box for 1 year while subscription is active. And college basketball is nonstop. Big games, tight spreads, momentum swings every single night, from early tip-offs to late night West Coast shootouts, I should say. There's always action on the board. And now FanDuel is giving away your chance to make things even bigger and more fun and more exciting with college basketball parlay profit boosts. You can build any college hoops parlay you want, rivalry games, ranked matchups, whatever fits. You can mix spreads, totals, and player props to match how you see things playing out. And then you apply the profit boost and instantly bump up the potential payout. Go safe, go bold, ride with the team you've been following all season. It's your parlay, your style, now with more upside behind it. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com. FanDuel, play your game. So I wanted to update you on all of the players we talked about, the LA Kings possibly being interested in acquiring at the trade deadline. Robert Thomas, St. Louis Blues, did not get traded. Elias Pettersson, Vancouver Canucks, did not get traded. Vincent Trocheck of the New York Rangers did not get traded. Ryan O'Reilly, the Nashville Predators, did not get traded. Nazem Kadri of the Calgary Flames did get traded. He was sent back to the Colorado Avalanche, where he once helped that team win a Stanley Cup. That was one of the bigger trades at the trade deadline. As for all the wingers that we talked about, Patrick Laine, Montreal Canadiens, did not get traded. Blake Coleman of the Calgary Flames did not get traded. Evander Kane of the Vancouver Canucks did not get traded. Bobby McMahon of the Toronto Maple Leafs did get traded, and he goes to a team that the Kings are competing with for a playoff spot. That's the Seattle Kraken. I thought he was a decent add for Seattle. They only gave up a second-round pick and a fourth-round pick for a guy who has 19 goals and 32 points so far this season. So I thought that was a pretty decent pickup for Seattle. Michael Bunting of the Nashville Predators went to the Dallas Stars for a third-round pick. Connor Garland of the Vancouver Canucks was traded to the Columbus Blue Jackets for a second-round pick and a third-round pick. So those are some of the names that we had kind of talked about or thrown out there as far as possibilities for the LA Kings, and a lot of them did not get traded. We had Trevor Beggs on, one of the hosts of Locked On Vancouver Canucks. He thought Elias Pettersson was a pretty good fit for the Kings, but he did say he didn't think it would happen at the deadline. He thought this would be a NHL draft type of a trade. So we'll see if that ends up being a possibility or not. As far as any big splashes made by the teams that the Kings are competing with, I talked about the Bobby McMahon pickup for Seattle. The Anaheim Ducks made a pretty big splash as they traded for veteran defenseman John Carlson from the Washington Capitals. Not a lot of people had this out there. Carlson is considered to be the greatest defenseman ever to play for the Capitals, and the Ducks shipped out a first and a third-round pick to pick up that veteran defenseman. The Edmonton Oilers picked up two centers and a defenseman. They get forwards Colton Dock and Jason Dickinson from the Chicago Blackhawks for Andrew Mangiapane and a first-round pick. And they also picked up defenseman Connor Murphy in a separate deal with Chicago for a second-round pick. Nashville Predators shipped out 4 players, all for draft picks, while adding nothing. Utah Mammoth added defenseman Mackenzie Weegar for a player, a prospect, and 3 second-round picks. So that was something similar than I thought that maybe the Kings were looking to do with all those second-round picks that they had acquired. Vegas Golden Knights pick up a couple of depth forwards, Nick Dowd and Cole Smith. Very un-Vegas Golden Knights-like at the trade deadline. They usually make a pretty bold move. I was almost certain that they were going to make a trade for a goalie, either a Sergei Bobrovsky or a Jordan Binnington, and that turned out to not be the case. So those were the teams that the Kings are in competition with for a playoff spot. And what did they do at the deadline? Nothing huge. I mean, even the Ducks getting John Carlson, it was a surprising move. But I don't know that, anybody made a huge move here that kind of guarantees that they're going to be in a playoff spot or have, strengthened themselves so much that maybe instead of being a team that makes it to, out of the first round, maybe they make it out of the second round. I don't think any of these moves really put anybody over the top, so to speak. So back to the LA Kings. They are going to be back in action on Saturday, hosting the Montreal Canadiens. Going to mention how they did in their game against the Ducks coming up here in just a bit. Some medical news to tell you about. Quinton Byfield is going to be going with the Kings on their upcoming road trip, and there apparently is a slight chance he could play on Saturday, but my gut feeling says that they'll probably not rush him, but he will make his return at some point in the upcoming road trip for the Kings. Joel Armia not going on the road trip. He is considered week to week. New pickup, Mathieu Joseph is expected to be in the lineup on Saturday against Montreal, make his Kings debut. Have not heard any word on when Scott Laughton exactly will be able to join the team. So the question now for the Kings is, where is everyone going to fit, assuming Laughton and Joseph are going to be in the lineup the rest of the way? Obviously, Andrei Kopitar is not going anywhere from his center position. I would be very surprised and disappointed if Samuel Hellenius was moved off that fourth-line center spot. Apparently, head coach DJ Smith says that he expects to start Joseph on a line with the youngsters from Ontario, Kenny Connors and Jared Wright. So that'll be an interesting line. That would keep Alex Turcotte, at least for now, centering Alex Laferriere and Trevor Moore. So the question is, what do the Kings do when Quinton Byfield returns? Does he play center? If so, where does Alex Turcotte go? Does he go to the wing? Is he going to be the fourth line center? Does Byfield get put on the wing? And if so, where does he slot in? So it's not going to be an issue on Saturday against Montreal, but likely will be something that needs to be figured out coming up at some point here in the future. Did the Kings lose any ground in the standings after Friday's action? And we'll also update you on the streaking Ontario Reign. We'll do that next here on Locked In LA Kings, your team every day. Workplace chaos, deadline stacking up, inboxes overflowing, and the one position you have to fill is still sitting open. When the pressure's on and you need the right hire, that's a job for sponsored jobs. Indeed, sponsored jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for, skills, experiences, location, so you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute that I'll be talking to you about this, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. And listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now. Support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. Join the Everydayer Club for ad-free audio, access to our group chat on Discord, and more. Use the code DEADLINE ahead of the NHL trade deadline for 1 month free. I am told that code will still work through the weekend, even though the trade deadline is over. Join now at lockedonlakings.supercast.com or hit the link in the show notes. All right, checking the scoreboard on Friday. The Ducks beat the Canadiens 6-5 in a shootout. So the team that the Kings will be playing next will be playing back-to-back Montreal after a 6-5 shootout loss to the Ducks. Oilers lose to the Hurricanes 6-3. Golden Knights lose to the Wild 4-2, while the Sharks lost to the Blues, but it was 3-2 in overtime, so San Jose did get a point at it. So let's see where the standings lie as we are going into the weekend. As far as the Pacific Division, the Ducks, with their come-from-behind win over the Canadiens, are now in first place in the Pacific Division. Somewhere Eden Brea is having a mild heart attack, although he'll claim that he said that all along and they're going to win the Stanley Cup. Anyway, 73 points for the Ducks, one better than the Vegas Golden Knights, who now sit in second place. The Oilers are in third with 68 points. Seattle in fourth place with 67. Then you've got the Sharks picking up that 1 point for their overtime loss to St. Louis at 65 points. And then the Kings are in sixth place in the Pacific Division, 64 points, but just 4 points behind the Oilers. I say just 4. 4 points behind the Oilers for that third spot and the automatic playoff spot. But of course, they would also have to jump over both the Sharks and the Kraken. As for the wild card race, told you Utah won their game. They've got 70 points. Seattle was off on Friday, so they still are at 67. Sharks are 2 points back of Seattle for that final playoff spot, and the Kings are 3 points back of the Kraken for that last playoff spot. Same goes for the Nashville Predators, also at 64 points. So still within reach for the Kings, but obviously every game is pretty big the rest of the way. Checking the schedule for Saturday, you've got the Kings hosting the Canadiens, the Kraken hosting the Senators, go Ottawa. Sharks host the Islanders, and the Mammoth are at the Blue Jackets. Some games that we'll be keeping an eye on coming up on Saturday. Did want to update you on the Ontario Reign. Things are going real well for the Reign. And also, with the additions of Jared Wright and Kenny Connors and Angus Booth briefly, the Ontario Reign are doing some nice things this season. When they've called Andre Lee earlier, when the Kings have called up players from Ontario, these guys have done a really good job. So very encouraging what's going on with the Ontario Reign. Our fan correspondent, Don of the San Fernando Valley, did check in with a report on the last game for Ontario. It was a 4-1 victory on March the 4th against the Tucson Roadrunners. Don says that both Angus Booth and Jared Wright returned to the Reign lineup from the Kings. Tucson in this game was limited to just 10 shots in the first 2 periods. Eric Portillo made some outstanding saves, especially early in the third. He stopped 18 of 19 shots that he faced overall. Andre Lee and Jared Wright were standouts in the game. Lee had a goal and an assist, while Wright scored twice. Both were good defensively as well. Lee assisted on Martin Chromiak's opening goal and scored in the third period on a slick-looking deflection of a Cole Gutman shot. Half a minute later, Lee's third period score, or half a minute after Lee's third period score, Jared Wright scored on his own deflection on a long shot by Angus Booth. In the closing minutes, Wright scored an empty netter that put the game away. Jared Wright now a team-leading plus 27 on the season. He says that Wright now has 17 goals and 13 assists and 30 points in 54 games. He says seems headed for a 20-goal rookie season in the AHL, which is impressive for a defensive first player. He said the team looks disciplined and persistent in their effort. Coach Andrew Lord appears to be doing a very solid job so far. Ontario is still leading the Western Division. And I can update you that the Reign extended their winning streak with a Friday night victory over the Henderson Silver Knights by a score of 4-3. That's 6 wins in a row for Ontario. They were down 1-0 after the first period when Kenta Asogai, who was just called up from the Greenville Swamp Rabbits of the ECHL, scored his second goal of the season to tie it up. Then Martin Chromiak's 19th goal of the year gave the Reign a 2-1 lead heading into the third. Andre Lee added his 23rd goal of the season in the third, but Henderson scored twice to tie it up at 3-3, and we would go beyond regulation. After a scoreless overtime, Martin Chromiak scored the only goal in the shootout to win it and was named the number 1 star of the game. Again, 4-3, Reign beat the Silver Knights in a shootout. Second star of the game was goalie Phoenix Copley. He stopped 30 of 33 shots, and he stopped all 3 shooters he saw in the shootout. So the Ontario Reign improved to 37, 16, and 1 on the year. They've got 76 points. They are in first place in the Pacific Division. So the Reign looking to put that 6-game winning streak on the line. Their next game will be Saturday against the Henderson Silver Knights. And I apologize, I did not write down if that was a home game or a road game. So if you're going to plan on going to that game, then I'm sure you will figure that out on your own. Regardless, like I said, things are going well in Ontario, which is good to see. And the Reign are playing like one of the better teams in the AHL. And like I said, when the Kings have called up some of their players, they've all performed pretty well. So encouraging things going on with the Ontario Reign. Hey, thanks for tuning in, and make sure you subscribe and follow Locked On LA Kings so you get all the latest updates. If you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Get Locked On LA Kings ad-free, plus members-only Discord access and more. Head to lockedonlakings.supercast.com to join the club. For you everydayers, those you listen to watch Locked On LA Kings every day, our next show will be following the Kings-Canadiens game on Saturday. We'll recap that game, and then our next show after that will be a fan feedback show. We'll be getting to all of the emails regarding the coaching change, and I'm guessing there'll be a few mixed in there about what's going on with the Kings at the trade deadline and the rest of the season. If you want to react to any of that, the email address is lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE. You can always leave your comments if you're watching on YouTube in the comments section. We appreciate that. And we would love you to stay interactive with the show on social media, X, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. We are at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thanks for listening and watching Locked On LA Kings, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you next time. And as always, go Kings, go.